Welcome to Cruising Japan in a Sailboat. I'm Lowell Shepherd. In this episode, I want to introduce to you an expert on cruising in Japan, Kirk Patterson of Konpira Consulting. This is a video I produced for my Pacific Solo channel. I've edited it just to focus right in on the tips he gives for cruising in Japan. Enjoy.
Japan, I think, is one of the great cruising grounds in the world. It's not known, but it's fantastic. There are very few negatives and lots of positives. So the first positive everybody mentions is the people in Japan. Omotenashi, Japanese hospitality. The people are friendly, helpful, sincere, honest, and so just the human interaction. Every time you go to a fishing port or a marina, you'll meet people, and if you're in trouble, they'll help you. So the people are great. History and culture is fascinating. So wherever you go, there's a temple, a shrine, a castle, some interesting tidbit of history that may not be, taught around the world, but in that little town, they've got their claim to fame in the 14th century, the 16th century, or whatever. So there's always something to learn about Japanese history and culture wherever you go. The scenery is fantastic. And one of the reasons I think Japan is such a great place to cruise is the diversity of scenery. So Japan's a very long country. So northern Hokkaido is at the same latitude as Montreal. And southern Japan, Okinawa, Oshigaki, same latitude as Key West, Florida. So you've got that same range of geography. You've got very rugged, wild geography in the north, in Hokkaido, which makes sailing challenging there. You've got temperate climate. You've got down in the south, you've got coral atolls and beautiful beaches, and you've got the Seto Inland Sea, which is own geography, lots of islands and currents and all that. So the diversity of the scenery. If you cruise the BC Alaska coast, you've got magnificent mountains and trees. You go for a week and you still have magnificent mountains and trees. Another week is the same. The scenery doesn't change on the entire BC Alaska coast. The scenery is the same. You open your eyes and you wouldn't know where you are. In Japan, there's always new scenery, physical scenery, the towns, the villages along the way. So the scenery is fantastic and diverse. Japanese food is delicious and regional fare. What you get in Hokkaido is different from what you get in Hokkaido, from what you get in Okinawa. I'm a big fan of sake. So I made a point of tasting the sake in different areas and then getting into shochu in Kyushu, etc. So there's lots of positives. There's very, very few negatives. Challenge for most foreign cruisers is the language.
Right.
So I read Japanese. That makes things easier for me. And lack of language ability makes life challenging for foreign cruisers. But looking at my clients, their experience, it often comes down to the personality of the cruiser. Some cruisers, they roll with it and they think that's part of experience, and they muddle along with their Google Translate function and gestures or whatever. And some cruisers, they get really frustrated and irritated and angry. But the language can be a challenge. Yeah. It used to be the big negative was the bureaucracy. But for a foreign boat now in Japan, there are very few problems in cruising. You can get a permit to enter all the closed ports, which was a problem before. You can get a customs permit to freely enter all the ports around Japan. So in the past, the bureaucratic problems were a disincentive for many cruisers to come. That's gone now. Probably the biggest challenge is the typhoon season, and how to handle typhoons and where to go for typhoons. But having said that, Japan's been handling typhoons for 1,500 years. The harbors are well set up for handling typhoons. Well in advance if a typhoon is coming. So I've sat out, I think, 8 typhoons, the close direct hit typhoons, except for one broken cleat on my boat. I never had any damage, any issues. One time the typhoon was so ferocious and so close that I did leave my boat and slept on land that night. But even the typhoons, you can manage them if you get to a safe port early, and you know a week in advance if they're coming. So that's the biggest challenge. There are other challenges you just need to be aware of. There's lots of aquaculture areas that it's all, if you have good charts, it's all on the charts. So you can see where the fishing nets and aquaculture areas are. So you can avoid those. Many of the fishing boats are small, one person on board on autopilot. He's dealing with his nets and not worrying about where he's going. So you have to watch that. But that's, again, wherever you sail, you have to be aware of what's around you and deal with it. Up in the north, there's lots of fog, so you have to have very good radar, know how to use your radar. But they're really then you're getting into just typical challenges of sailing anywhere. So except for the typhoons, of course there are tropical storms in many parts of the world, so even that's not unique. But except for the typhoons, Japan is really not challenging at all. The great things about cruising in Japan is you can moor almost anywhere for free. Most of the mooring in Japan is in fishing ports, and which are free. Now, in years past, sailors from 20, 30 years ago would tell me stories about, you can't go into fishing ports because you'll get kicked out and all that. But now the fishing ports are becoming empty. Fishing is dying as an industry, especially the small boat fishing. So you can go into a fishing port almost anywhere, and except near Tokyo or Osaka, and find a place to tie up, and it's free. And walking distance to an onsen and a local restaurant and whatever. So foreign cruisers, sometimes, in most countries, the standard thing is to anchor. Anchoring is difficult in Japan for a variety of reasons. So fishing ports are the default option. There are places where you can anchor, but in general, fishing ports are a great place to spend time, and you get to meet the local people, which if you're anchoring, you don't meet anybody.
So fishing ports, though, you'll be on a wall.
Right.
So how do cruisers need to prepare for being on a wall?
Yes, you need very large fenders, large round polyform fenders. You can buy in Japan the styrofoam fenders a fishermen use. You need jumbo-sized fenders, and many of them. On my boat, I had 4 jumbo ones, 4 semi-jumbo ones, and 4 normal ones, and all preset in terms of length of the rope, which is where I would hang them off the boat. And because you're on a concrete wall, you've got the corner of the concrete wall, and your dock lines will scrape against the edge of that wall, so you need to use wire cable or chains to connect from the bollard to the dock line, so the dock line is not rubbing against the wall. And because you're against the wall and fixed wall, so the tidal change will push the boat up and down, and so you need to how to adjust the dock lines appropriately, so you're not getting up in the middle of the night to adjust them. You set them so that they're tight at low tide, but still manageable at high tide.
And you also advised me once to get a step ladder, which actually I have, and I've used a couple of times for extremely low tides.
That's right.
To get off the boat.
Yeah, you need a ladder for the tides. There are often cut into the concrete walls concrete steps. Right. If you can tie up against that, that's easy. But if that's not available, then having a ladder is essential. And always make sure, as I sometimes didn't, to make sure the ladder is where you are. If you're on land, the ladder should be on land, not on the boat.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's in hindsight, that would have been. I should have thought of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, I know there's an overlap in these categories, but there's different types of moorages in Japan. There's the straightforward fishing port against the wall. There's fish arenas. There's marinas, and then there's the sea station, which can be either a marina or a fish arena or something different.
Right. So umieki, sea station, those are guest moorage facilities that welcome visitors.
Right.
And there's about 160 of them and about 2/3 of that are marinas. So marinas will register as an umineki,
Right.
and the other 1/3 are local fishing co-ops or local governments that might have a dock for 1 boat or 2 boats or 5 boats or whatever.
And always pontoons?
No, there are sometimes concrete walls.
Okay.
I can think of a couple offhand. Generally pontoons, generally floating pontoons, but not always. And the prices vary. If it's a marinas, they just charge the regular prices. There's no benefit to being umineki. But some are free. So it ranges between expensive and free. And generally, the non-marina uminekis are quite reasonable.
Right.
Some of them only handle smallish or small boats. So a lot of foreign cruisers, 50, 60 feet, cannot stay at most of the local uminekis. Fisherinas are marinas operated by the local fishing co-ops, but and some are very simple, and some are just for smaller boats, and sometimes just for power boats. But some are full-scale marinas and indistinguishable from a normal marina.
Right.
After I did my circumnavigation, I realized that Japan's a great place to cruise, but there's no information about it. So I decided to write a cruising guide to Japan. So I was going to, and I started living on an island in the Seto Inland Sea as my base to be able to write the cruising guide. And so I cruised for 3 more years after the circumnavigation, so a total of 6 years, gathering information for the cruising guide. But along the way, I met a woman at a marina in Fukuoka, and I married her. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And so in stages moved from the island home to Fukuoka, and now we have a 4-year-old daughter. So the cruising guide has sort of been put on the back burner, but you alluded to my favorite ports blogs, and those are really the starting point for what the cruising guide will be. I'll flesh those out, but that's forcing me to work on the cruising guide. So Konpira Consulting was established as a different way, in addition to the cruising guide, to support foreign cruisers. Konpira is the Buddhist god of sailors or seafarers.
Right.
And so Konpira takes care of foreign cruisers, Konpira Consulting takes care of foreign cruisers, and Konpira the god takes care of seafarers. So I wanted to support other foreign cruisers, and this came about because different people were passing my name around to other sailors. So people would say, "Oh, you're going to Japan, contact Kirk." So I was getting a lot of calls and emails from people needing advice. So I set up Konpira Consulting to serve foreign cruisers coming to Japan, and more broadly to support marine tourism. Because I think the Japanese ocean is fantastic, and whether it's sailing or kayaking or surfing or fishing, whatever, there's lots of different activities to be done along Japan's oceans.
Check out Kirk's website, konpira-consulting.com. Particularly read his blog about his favorite ports around Japan. Thanks for watching. Thanks again to Kirk. Please subscribe.